been what, almost 30 years since we've had something like Pletol, which half my patients don't even tolerate,
Right.
and has other adverse effects. So now we actually have something that could potentially that helps reduce pain. There's objective information now saying that their walking distance got better, their ABIs got better. So this is now maybe a vascular drug too.
Yeah, and I firmly believe it is because, what we learned from this study is that the effects were really independent of weight loss or the other effects, and they, just like you said, the sort of blood pressure hemodynamic measure of sort of the perfusion of the legs got better. We've never seen that with the drug before, so I really do believe these are vascular drugs. And actually, in the same meeting where we presented this trial, there was another 9,000 patient trial that showed that it reduced the risk of things like amputation and chronic limb-threatening ischemia and acute limb ischemia. So I think this is clearly a vascular drug. This is not that people walk better because they lost weight. It's because their vasculature got healthier.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, I'm wondering because I work with some of these patients that they, when your glucose is really high, your blood is very thick and syrupy and sticky. And I'm wondering if it's also just part of it that the blood becomes much thinner and it's more amenable to getting through some of these narrowed areas, if that could be part of the improvement that you're seeing in these patients.
Well, it's a great question. So the glucose definitely went down. You have a very good point. So the hemoglobin A1C, the blood test we use to kind of measure blood sugar control, got better in patients who took the semaglutide by about 1%. That being said, they were really well treated patients. I mean, if you look at the background therapy and the blood glucose levels, they were pretty good overall. And so that, if I saw a patient population like this, I'd say, their diabetes well treated, their cholesterol levels of bad cholesterol was 69. They were on all the drugs they're supposed to be, and the improvement in glucose was part of it, but it was pretty modest. It didn't explain the magnitude of effect we saw. So I think that's part of the story, like you said, but it's not the whole story.
So, Mark, could you go into the trial design a little bit for us? So, my understanding is there were about 800 patients, and after you screened them out and basically divided them out to get the semaglutide at the 1 milligram or not. So, normally, if I'm correct, you start the semaglutide at 0.25 and you kind of titrate yourself up. Were these folks titrated up, or did you start them at one and like watch them for 52 weeks and then you look for these objective changes?
Yeah, they were titrated up. So it's exactly like you said, 800 patients, and they were randomized. So we didn't know who was getting the drug and who was getting a matching placebo. And I think that's a really important part because when you ask people how they feel and other things, if you know that you're getting an active drug versus nothing, that might influence what you report. But here we had a matching placebo. Everyone was titrated up the same way to 1 milligram subcutaneously per week, and then they were treated for 52 weeks. And then we saw them pretty frequently, made sure they were doing okay. And then we had a baseline at 6 months at the end of the trial. And then actually 5 weeks after the last dose of treatment, we did really rigorous testing on treadmills, ankle brachial index, a bunch of measures to understand, how they were doing.
Well, and, in your report, you also mentioned you had a little trouble in the beginning trying to get patients. Why were you having trouble? You mentioned something about there were too many patients getting early interventions, but were you going after the wrong pool of patients in the wrong place, or what seemed to be the issue that led to your struggle?
Yeah, so in order to really understand, well, I guess there are two things. One, for patients with PAD, we really need to treat them earlier in the course of disease. We shouldn't be waiting for people that sort of about to have an amputation. So we wanted to find people with what we called early stage PAD to try to modify the course of disease or prevent progression. But part of that is that they were symptoms. They had to have symptoms. And, in various places, there's a lot of procedure. There's a lot of revascularization procedures for people who have symptoms. And you can't have that during a study like this because you can't measure the effect of the drug if somebody does a bypass surgery or something else like that. It interferes with the test. So we wanted early stage PAD. The other part of it was that we started recruitment in October of 2020, which, if you remember, is the sort of middle of the early part of the pandemic. And this was a trial you couldn't do remotely. We had to have people come into centers. These were medical grade treadmills, calibrated treadmills, a very high quality study, but you have to come in and run on a treadmill or walk on a treadmill. And during the pandemic, not a lot of folks were, eager to do that. So we got there. It was just we had to work hard to find the right population. And I mean, I think we worked really hard to do a high quality study, which sometimes takes longer than to just sort of enroll anybody, but it really does allow you to answer the question.
Coming up right here on the Heart of Innovation, we'll have more with Dr. Marc Bonaca on the STRIDE trial, a groundbreaking trial, bringing us a potential game-changing drug for people with peripheral artery disease for the first time in more than 2 decades. So you don't want to miss the rest of the story. Don't go away. Okay, Dr.
Awesome.
John, bring us right
All
back.
right, let's do it.
Next 7. Thank you.
Three. All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It is a privilege to have Dr. Marc Bonaca on the show. We are talking about the STRIDE trial and the use of semaglutide to actually improve patients with peripheral arterial disease. So it's interesting, right? Because we approach the semaglutides as, well, you have diabetes. It will help you lose weight, help you get your blood sugar under control, also reduce cardiovascular events. But now it makes you feel better. That's an easy sell, Mark, isn't it?
That's a really great point. We work so hard in prevention to treat things like blood pressure and lower cholesterol, but they're hard because they don't make people feel better. Here we have a drug that, prevents heart attack, prevents stroke, other things like that, but it actually made people have less pain when they walk. It made them walk further, and it improved their quality of life using two really rigorous quality of life measures that are validated. And so, I think at the base, when we look for novel therapies, we want to know, does it improve function? Does it make people feel better or live longer? The answer is yes to all three of those for this drug, which is really rare.
And what's incredible is I would imagine that your struggle with getting patients in the trial is just indicative of the current state of affairs where people are not getting diagnosed early on before they develop these symptoms. And especially for diabetics, a lot of these diabetics don't even develop symptoms until they're basically a toe stop away from amputation. A lot of times it's wounds that won't heal that become the first indication that, whoa, there might be a circulation problem. Do you think that having a drug like this available will inspire primary care and endocrinologists to start being a little bit more assertive in diagnosing these patients sooner versus later?
What a great comment. I mean, I think that may be one of the key take homes. I think out there's a lot of people who think, well, why bother testing? Because what are you going to do about it? And are people just going to get procedures? And we don't find people out there with PAD, but we know that if you look at people over the age of 55 with diabetes or a history of smoking or over 75, 1 in 3 have PAD. And so everyone, that's listening to this knows somebody who has it, right? But we're not diagnosing it. I think having an effective therapy that makes people feel better, makes people live longer, that improves their function, hopefully will be an incentive for people to look and say, well, maybe you're not walking so well. It's not just that you're getting older, but maybe there's a blockage in your leg artery, or maybe it's not just your arthritis or something else. Maybe we should test. And it's, a very easy and inexpensive thing to test for.
And do you think that, with these drugs being out there on the market for diabetics, that now they may end up becoming prescribed for patients that do not have diabetes, do not have weight loss issues? If will it be available, do you think, for people that are thinner, that are more fit? Or do you think that it'll be something that's not right for them because they might end up losing too much weight?
Yeah, we didn't see it. It's a really great question. STRIDE, about 30 to 40% of the patients had a normal body mass index, and they didn't lose too much weight. They got the same benefit. Right now you could prescribe one of these drugs for patients who have diabetes, they have obesity, and if they have cardiovascular disease and a body mass index above 27. There was a trial called SELECT that showed there was a benefit there. So, and now I'm hopeful that this might be another indication for the drug, peripheral artery disease. I would certainly hope that, that becomes an indication. Now, there is a group of patients that have peripheral artery disease, a BMI less than 27, don't have diabetes, that wouldn't really be sort of on label right now. Might some clinicians try it? Well, they might. I mean, it would be an off-label use of the drug. I think that we need a trial to tell us, is the benefit the same? I really believe it would be, but that's why we do, research.
So moving forward, do you think that folks will need to be on this the rest of their life? And if so, because a lot of people that are on semaglutide for weight loss or some of the other benefits, they'll kind of get a dose titrated. They'll lose the 12% or 17% with tirzepatide of their body weight, and then they wean themselves and they stay on a maintenance dose. Do you think folks will be on maintenance dose or the 1 milligram, or do you just stop it and restart it every once in a while? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question. It may not be the same for everyone. I mean, two observations. One, when we look at the benefit of semaglutide versus placebo, we stopped at a year because we had enough information, but the curves continue to diverge. And so I really do think we were modifying the disease. The second thing is that people stopped treatment at 52 weeks, and we tested them again at 57 weeks, and the benefit was the same. So, I think that there probably are long-term reasons to stay on treatment, maybe at a maintenance dose. But I think even if you can't or you choose not to, that there may be a sustained benefit.
Yeah. So what do you think in terms of the next steps for this, for these doctors? Do you think, what's the feedback that you've gotten from people that, oh my gosh, I'm going to use this for all of my patients? And of course, you said it's off label, but they doctors, if they think it's right and you have a major study such as this to support it,
Yeah.
do you see that happening? Is that the feedback that you're getting? Hey, I'm doing this. This is great.
Yeah, well, I think that there is a large group of patients who can get this right now on label. If they have diabetes, they have PAD and a BMI over 27, or they're obese, they can get these drugs right now on label. And so I think, the receipt of the data has been really overwhelming. I mean, people are like, wow, we finally have something. I mean, this was stated at the beginning of, it's been 25 years since we had an effective therapy. We never had one that makes people live longer, feel better, and function better. So I do think there's going to be broad use. I expect there probably will be even some off-label use in those that don't have diabetes and a high BMI. And I understand that. I mean, this is a really difficult thing to treat, and we're always looking for new ways to treat our patients.
And coming up next, right here on the Heart of Innovation, we do have some patients that have a few questions for Dr. Bonaca. So we'll get to those in just a moment. Don't go away, right here on the Heart of Innovation on KDOW. Stay with us. I'm curious, and I wanted to get to before we get to a couple of the patients.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people that are global that are wondering if this is something that that you see happening, globally. And then number two is the price is just going to have to come down for so many people. And that's a major problem.
Yeah, we should talk.
Who do we have questions from that want to get in? I think Douglas had a question. Donna has a question. Tirzepatide. Oh, some of the other ones like that. Do you think that some of the other ones might, just not in this class, but maybe some of the other ones might have an impact?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll
I
get Donna. Donna,
also, oh, sorry. I guess maybe we could talk about this offline. I'm curious though, I know you guys did ABIs and walking distance, but do you think that there's like lesion specific benefit? So an iliac versus an SFA versus a tibial, was that delineated at all, or was it just PAD based on the ABIs?
Yeah, so
that's a
we
good
we didn't,
question.
but we could talk about that. I think
Okay.
if I mean I can answer during this.
Okay.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
get into because let's get into your question there. And I think we just have a couple questions coming
Yeah.
in here. So I think we'll be fine. So Doctor, take it wherever you want, Dr. John.
All right, very good. Three, two, one. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Mark, I've got a question, kind of nerded out a little bit, and as I imagine you are, like, what exactly is going on? And I know the anti-inflammatory component of it, but is there some lesion-specific benefit? So perhaps a blockage in above the growing versus below the growing or below the knee. Do we know that having a blockage one place or another, there might be a better benefit with the medication?
Great question. What we saw was that the benefit was consistent no matter where the lesions were or the blockages were. Your question about mechanism is spot on. And so when you look at patients with PAD, there is an inflammatory component. You see inflammation around the vessels, and that can even lead to some constriction of the vessels or limitation of flow. And there was a coronary study with semaglutide showing that there were changes in that adipose and inflammation around the vessels. Now, we didn't do that in this study, but I think that might be a next step in understanding mechanism is looking at the effects this class of drug on the inflammation around the vessels and whether that's why the blood flow is getting better.
Okay, I want to get to a couple of questions really quick because they are burning for some patients. And so I want to jump to Marcia O. Marcia O, go ahead and unmute and ask Dr. Bonaca your question. Okay, Marcia O is not available. We'll go to Donna. Donna, go ahead and unmute and ask Dr. Bonaca your question.
Kim, there might be something that they can't unmute as the host. You're
They
controlling
can
things.
unmute when I press the button,
Oh.
and I am trying to get them to unmute, and they're not. So I'm going to have to edit this. So those who are live are just going to have to get
So while we're
this.
trying to unmute them, so Mark, is this stuff going to be in the water?
Yeah, great question. There are so many benefits. I do think that this is a game changer. This class of drugs, game changer. I mean, it makes sleep apnea better, right? Makes your kidney function better, reduces heart attacks and strokes, make people feel better. So I think it's a game changer. But one of the people had asked about tirzepatide, another drug in this class. It works on two receptors, not just one. We're going to really have to learn about which agents have which effects. I think the good news is there's so much development. People are developing oral drugs, long-acting drugs, short-acting drugs, that's going to bring price down and make these more available. I think over the next, years, we're going to see that these are going to be broadly available and in a way that, people can take them.
Fantastic. We can try this again. Let's try going to Marcia. And Marcia, go ahead and unmute and ask Dr. Bonaca your question.
Hi. Sorry, oh geez, I've got a problem.
Just ask your question. We'll fix it.
No, my computer froze or something. I don't know, and I could hear myself. Anyway, thank you, and I'm sorry, I was having a computer problem. I wanted to ask if other drugs, and I don't know that much about drugs, could work the same way that aren't the three that you've talked about. And one of them is Adipex or phentermine, because I was on it for a very, very short time and I could walk like crazy, but it was a pill form and it was a low dose.
Great question. I don't know. I mean, phentermine is a really different mechanism from what we studied. So I wouldn't necessarily take the results of STRIDE and broaden it to something like phentermine. But I think what you said is really intriguing, and I wonder whether it could have some of the same anti-inflammatory or cardiometabolic benefits. I think we need to study to know. But thank you for sharing that. I think a great opportunity.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Marcia. And I think we have a question coming in from Susan. Susan, do you want to go ahead and unmute and ask the doctor your question as well?
Yes, I was on it for 1 month. I guess it was like the generic version, because I got it online, and I've never felt better. But when I tried to find a doctor to prescribe it, I can't find a doctor that will, except for Wegovy, which even with insurance, it cost me $800, which I can't afford.
Yeah, see, this is an issue with so many patients. How are we going to handle, especially if this is such a breakthrough for these patients with PAD? We have the most vulnerable populations that can't afford these GLP-1 drugs. Any talk on what we can do here? Because now everyone's excited about it, but if people can't get their hands on it because of the cost, that's a problem.
Yeah, coverage is very different depending on the indication. So coverage for weight loss is much more difficult than coverage for diabetes or coverage for vascular disease. I'm hopeful that, this data will help change the coverage for this indication for patients with PAD. That being said, it's still going to be too expensive for a lot of people, but I am encouraged. There's so much development. I think there's going to be multiple agents on the market in the next few years, including oral versions, injectable versions, and hopefully we'll be able to have a solution that most people can access.
And we have Alan. Alan, go ahead and unmute and ask Dr. Bonaca your question. I would imagine he's over in Canada, so he's probably wondering, is this going to be available globally for people? Alan, go ahead.
I'm I'm sorry, my brain's not working very well today. What is the name of the drugs?
So you have Wegovy, Ozempic, and Rybelsus.
Ozempic.
And we're going to go to Donna. Donna, go ahead and unmute and ask the doctor your question. She is not able to unmute.
Oh,
This is live radio. This
There
is
she
live.
is.
I've
Go
got
ahead,
it.
Donna.
My question was around the tirzepatide. Is it possible that those same results could be seen with the tirzepatide?
Yeah, it's possible. It certainly is possible. It's something that, hoping that we can study in a future trial. Right now, I'd probably try to get the drug that was in the study. If you can't, in tirzepatide is what you're on, then it's hopefully it has some of the same effects.
And we want to get to Kathy. Do you have a short, quick question to go ahead and ask? Go ahead and ask Dr. Bonaca your question.
Okay, you can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, mine was a little bit of a long story. I am diabetic. Was on Ozempic from the endocrinologist for about 4 or 5 years. And I lost 90 pounds. My A1C went down to 5. So I was doing great, feeling great. And then Medicare came along and didn't approve paying for Ozempic, so it became unaffordable and that was for 2 years. So since then I've gained weight back, not too much, but then my A1C has gone up. But I was also on a keto diet. My concern is, did that keto diet contribute to a blood clot and I did have to have the bypass surgery on my leg, which
Really
was
sorry. Yeah.
a year ago last year.
I'm glad you're doing okay. I mean, having a blood clot and a bypass is a big deal. I'm very sorry to hear that. I'm not sure of, the keto diet and risk. I haven't seen data for that, so I don't think that contributed, but I don't know. But I do think it's worth revisiting. If you have diabetes and you've had that kind of problem, many patients are now getting coverage for these drugs. And so I would ask your doctors again to see, and I think that it would be of benefit, given that what we learned, and it should be covered for peripheral artery disease based on the select trial data and for diabetes, so anyway, I hope you're doing fine, and I'm sorry for what you went through, and I would try again.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for answering. And Marcia just has a question in regards to, Marcia, let's keep it to whether or not the drug's going to work for you. Go ahead and ask him your question.
Yes, hi, doctor. I'm not diabetic. I have critical limb threatening ischemia. I just had a toe amputation and I'm skinny. I'm too skinny. So I'm wondering what effect the drug might have on a person like me who's skinny and doesn't have diabetes.
It's a great question, and I'm sorry for all you're going through. I know, chronic limb threatening ischemia is a really, really tough problem. I have a lot of patients who have that. I believe from the data that we saw in STRIDE that the effect is independent of weight loss. And in fact, in the trial, patients who had, lower BMIs or body weights had the same benefit, but all of the patients did have diabetes. And so I do think that there's the great potential that it would work in someone like you too, but we need a trial to prove it because, even if it's independent of weight loss, all the patients in the studies had diabetes. So I think that's going to be the focus of future work, and hopefully will be done quickly so that we can expand access to this type of therapy to people like you if it does show the same benefit.
So
And
might I
final
be
question.
eligible
And
for this
Marcia,
study?
we got to run, okay?
Okay, yeah.
So go ahead and mute, and I'm going to do a lot of editing on this show.
Yes, you are.
So I know it's going to be so much work, but the live is the fun part. So just what do you think, Doctor? Is it going to be available? Do you think globally, is this something that you're seeing everyone excited about worldwide right now?
Yes, it is. I mean, I think that these drugs are available in many, many countries. There are many countries that have the same indications as we have in the United States. So I do think that the impact of the trial will be global. Yet, there are a lot of parts of the world where people really struggle to get access to, very basic medications where they're not going to be available yet. And again, this is where I think we all need to work together to expand access and come up with novel ways of this of affecting this treatment target. A long while ago statins weren't available to everybody globally. Now they are, and so I think these drugs will get there, but it's going to take some time.
Yeah,
And coming up right here on the Heart of Innovation, we're going to have the final takeaways from Dr. Bonaca and, of course, final thoughts from Dr. Phillips. So stay with us for our Spur of Innovation segment. That's next right here on the Heart of Innovation and KDOW. Okay. We just have 4 minutes, I promise. Sorry, Marcia. Sorry, everyone. We just it's also we have to get it for the radio show. So last segment really quickly here. I'm just going to go through a few of the things, and then we'll go. Okay. It's literally 4 minutes. So it's just
gotta
quick
get to those
takeaways.
kids. Gotta get to those kids.
Yeah. In 3, 2, Ozempic, I'll just say, hi everyone, welcome back. Ozempic, Wegovy, and Rybelsus, known as semaglutide drugs used for diabetes and for weight loss, have a significant effect on improving leg cramps in patients with poor circulation, known as PAD. The STRIDE trial just released shows patients taking these drugs had a 40-meter improvement in walking distance. They experienced a significant quality of life benefit and a 54% reduction in disease progression requiring intervention. Huge benefits from these drugs, and we're excited to see what more they could have for patients going forward. But this could be life-changing for millions who struggle with leg pain, with peripheral artery disease. So let's get the key takeaways on this study from lead investigator Dr. Marc Bonaca, followed by Dr. John Phillips' thoughts on how this will impact his patients as well. Dr. Bonaca?
Thank you. I thought you summarized it really well. It's the first time we've ever had a drug that makes people feel better, function better, and live longer. These is also a class of drug that improves kidney outcomes, sleep apnea, reduces heart attack and stroke. And so I do think this is a vascular drug that modifies the course of disease. And I hope it just opens the door to a new era of better therapies for people suffering from PAD.
And Dr. Phillips?
Yeah, I mean, I echo those sentiments. I think this is where the rubber meets the road, and we have to persevere and push the insurance companies to approve this, because I fear that, I can write the script, and if there's a pre-auth and all this inertia, then it kind of gets lost, and we really have to fight for our patients and do this. And then the other thing I'll say is that, some people might poo-poo 40 meters, but that's a lot for someone who I think at baseline they were at 180 or so. And if you look at people with heart failure, symptomatic heart failure, if they get an extra like 20 meters, they're ecstatic. So again, game changer, probably will affect the guidelines, I would imagine. And now we just have to get it to our patients and get them feeling better and living longer.
And from both of you, we know that interventions and surgical solutions to PAD and poor circulation, they're not durable. So do you see this as potentially being that ultimate holy grail for these patients, something that's durable for the long term with a huge impact?
Yeah, it's a great question. We observed, somewhere between 8 and 9% of the patients during the 1 year that we followed them progressed to needing procedure or having a bad outcome for the limb or actually dying. And we saw a 54% reduction in that progression. I have a lot of respect for my interventional and surgical colleagues. They do great work, but as you said, there are limits to those interventions and a lot of risks afterwards. I'm very hopeful over the long term this could really, really reduce the rate of progression and the need for those procedures, and I think that could be a game changer here.
And I love doing procedures as much as the next person, but you're right, the durability is questionable. I hope that we can figure out maybe certain biomarkers that put people at risk in their 20s and 30s, get them on some of these agents. So yeah, it might put me out of a job, but you're saving lives and preventing PAD and cardiovascular events.
On that note, thank you everyone for joining us. Congratulations to you, Dr. Marc Bonaca, and your entire team of investigators and all of the patients that were involved in this study. We thank them as well for their participation in such groundbreaking research. Thank you for everyone for joining us. We really appreciate you. I hope you have a great weekend.